this one again. Right? Right. Let me continue on what I started a while ago, and we'll continue on with the introduction sharing as other classmates will be entering. So as I said, remember, research writing is a conversation with other researchers. And then in taking notes, you can paraphrase, you can summarize, or you can quote. When you quote, of course, we already know that we use direct quotations, open and close quotations. In the Philippines, we use the double quotation mark to quote. Um, and then within the double quotation mark, if there's a quote within the double quotation, then you use the single quotation mark. That is basically in the Philippines, in the US. In UK, it's opposite. The single quotation mark is out is outside. The double quotation mark is within the single quotation mark. So it's opposite. Anyhow, the point is that in your conversation with other writers, you quote them, you bring in their opinions, and then sometimes you just summarize also. You just summarize their points, which is also okay. And when you summarize, you still need to put the source that you use in the footnotes. So whether you quote or you summarize, even when you paraphrase, you use different words. So if the idea is written in a very long paragraph and you just want to shorten it, you can paraphrase or you can summarize. But then you need to put the source still, because the idea is still the author's idea, the writer of the book that you are quoting. So um, it's good to bring in their opinions, their ideas, mix with your own. So it's a conversation. Uh, it's also like cooking. Uh, if you are cooking adobo, for instance, you need to master uh, the adobo, on how to cook adobo, chicken adobo or uh, pork adobo. Then when you master it and you want your twist, you can add, uh, some spices or other ingredients that may be your contribution in the cooking of adobo. Just like when I went to Dumaguete and they have this humba. It's like adobo, but it's also different. There's a twist, something like that. That's the Dumaguete or Ilonggo style humba. Now, it's also just like being a judge. When you're a judge, you hear different, uh, you hear the prosecutor and the defender of the accused. You need to listen to both sides of the debate or argument, and then the judge will decide. So that is your role as a researcher. You bring in different opinions, but you are weighing, which is which uh, area are you going, or will you support this, or you argue against this writer or not? So you can side with or contradict somebody, but you need to argue your case, right? So that's a part of research. Now, if you omit words or phrases or choose not to quote a complete sentence, show the omission by using ellipsis points. Use 3 points for the omission of a word or phrase. Use a fourth point to represent a period at the end of a sentence. Okay, so sometimes you want to quote a whole paragraph, but it's very long, so you just quote a portion of it, but you did not quote the whole sentence or paragraph. You just put 3 periods or 3 dots, and then the fourth dot will be the period. So usually, if you just remove the ending phrase, and then there will be 4 dots at the end, or you just omit, or let's say uh, you omit at the middle, and then you put the 3 dots or periods, dots, and then you put the period at the end of the sentence, right? I think we know that rule in writing. Use single quotation marks inside double quotation marks to set apart words, phrases, or clauses within the passage you are quoting. Hello? All right, okay. Let me go on. I think this is recorded. You can just catch up. And for those who did not attend today, they can also view this one. If your subject is controversial, consult equally the sources supporting each other. If your paper is persuasive, you must answer the arguments from the other side. If your paper is comparison and contrast, you must present both sides. That's what I'm saying a while ago, that you're acting as a judge. You need to hear different cases or arguments, and then you decide which is which. And you need to argue why you decide on this, why you side with one point and not the other one. You need to show your reason and evidence. Use transition to move into the body of your paper. Use transitional devices within and between paragraphs. The reader to follow your thoughts. You may use transitional words like thus, indeed, also, however, nevertheless, whereas, again, consequently, etc. Transitional phrases like as a result, in turn, in addition to, because of, in spite of, etc. You also can use these transitional phrases. So words, phrases, and even clauses like when the time come after the course was over, since there was no evidence or because the circumstances warranted it, although the cause questioned him, etc. So the point here is that when you go from one idea to another, there are transition words or phrases or clauses that you can use so that your paper becomes smooth. You know, the flow is smooth, and the transition. You know, you go, and there is unity and coherent in your work. Right. So maybe that's it. And let us go back to our classmates who will be sharing their introductions. So this time, James, are you there?
Yes, sir. Here, I'm here listening.
Now, can you share your idea?
Yeah. Thank you, sir. First of all, for the classmates that are listening, my laptop has been a casualty of Ulysses. here in Bataan. So our roof flew off dito sa so I'm at Quezon City right now. And but basically, sir, the idea that I had for the thesis, that the one that I'm typing, I gave in introduction of Martin Luther King.
All
And
right.
the most know him as a socio-political hero, in the sense that he was promoting uh, kind of the original Black Lives Matter, although the coin term wasn't given there yet. But a lot of people don't know that he is a minister. He's a pastor,
Mhm.
and the first followers from his protests during my research was the congregants. He had a lot of congregants that believed in his message, and those were of course, there were non-Christians in the march and protests during his time, but basically his character and his abilities, or his character, was mirrored into the members. And of course, we know some preachers and teachers that have different beliefs as ours. Like for example, I was putting this actually in the paper. Like I was doing a research of Robert Morris in a Gateway Community Church, or Gateway Church, Pastor Robert Morris. It's a very large church, and they are known for very encouraging sermons. Not necessarily prosperity. I've listened to some of the, but in in his uh, in his reports, or on his how would I say this his accountability reports or something like that. He is said to give a lot to the church. He doesn't take a lot, but he gives a lot. And then another one is Rick Warren, who's the pastor of Saddleback Church, who is a reverse tither. Until today, that he tithes 90% of his income, and 10% he tries to live off that. And Saddleback Church is one of the most generous churches when it comes to missions. There's a lot of papers here, sir. I just don't have the data, but it is relevant. So it is the character of the pastor that mirrors into the congregants, and I want to pull that back into the or the Pinoy context, which is a smaller church. So the smaller churches that are pastored by local church pastors, local Filipino pastors. Like for example, I'm going to do a research. So basically, talking, listening, viewing with them, having interviews with them, or talking with them, seeing how their character and their personas affect the own personalities or changes that happen with the congregants. Like for example, a church with 30 people, we have that here in Bataan, way back in Bataan. We have people that are 30, and the pastor is a singular proponent, and the pastor has characters like so and so, and the members would put it down like these are the characters that, like for example, uh, five obvious characters that the pastor does. Like for example, he's generous, or very he's very introverted, something like that. And I want to see if the congregants would show the same characters or characteristics as the pastor would. So the purpose of this research that I'm going to do is for the awareness of the pastor, ultimately, for to utilize that un to utilize that unintentional
Influence.
like for example, yes, that's like to utilize that for for the betterment of discipleship. Like they do not know, or they have no idea of that they put off this character, or they are influencing in this manner. And I want to put that in paper, so that the pastors, if they read this, or this is for a specific crowd, that they would understand and utilize their own personalities, or to bring them more awareness of themselves and how they are affecting their congregants, into to better disciple them into Christ likeness. So that's the purpose of the research, what why I'm doing that. So basically, I'm going to the in the introduction. And again, thank you for letting me share because I don't have the hard the draft copy. But basically, there's going to be the interview with the congregants and the pastor, and then just spend time there. I have already some selected groups because they're my friends. They're my friends, so it's going to be easier that way. And then of course the books, like for example this book right here, which I'm reading, is a resilient ministry, and it kind of talks about that some parts of this book. And so yeah, that's the idea of the introduction that I wanted to give.
Right. Thank you, James. And I think that's a very good research direction. Um, do you have some biblical basis for that?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I wanted to put. Ay, sorry. Yes. I wanted to put the apostles first. Sorry, sir. Nalaglag yung table. I wanted to put the apostles, like for example, Peter, as we all know Peter as being in the later parts of the Gospels, and of course when he denied Jesus, there was cowardice in him. And right after, Jesus faced the perfect obedience and all of that. And then we go to Acts chapter 2, the courage of Peter being empowered by the Holy Spirit, the same Holy Spirit that empowered Christ in to be led to the cross. And then going to Timothy, which pastored the church, and then seeing Paul pastor a church. The persona is there, the way that they lead, the way that they teach. Um, so biblically speaking, I wanted to
Words of Paul, follow me as I follow Christ.
yes, thank you, Pastor. Like those words, that imitation is not only taught, it's also caught.
Yes.
Like we see that. So the purpose of the research basically is for you to be more aware of yourself as the pastor. Like this research paper is for my friends as well. Like this is, although I will pass this as a my research, this is something that I will talk about with my pastor friends, in which, like there's a lot of churches that have been heavily involved in social justice, and heavily involved in, like, this typhoon, sir.
Yeah.
Like after the typhoon hit, not all churches gave the same way. Some churches went to the place, some raised funds. There are different approaches how to help, but ultimately, you see that the character of the pastor has been being emulated. I think I have a strong thesis about this, not only biblical, but just to help out. Even it's for me as well, as I pastor in my own church. So yeah,
All right. Thank you very much,
thank you, sir.
James. All right. Let's proceed with Floor. Floor, you're there.
Good morning, sir. Good morning, classmates.
Morning.
Okay. So, I have here the draft of my introduction, but I'm still I'm still on the process of finishing it, sir. But I will present anyway. Now, my topic is about civil partnership,
Yes.
and my introduction goes with this. So, it is undeniable that marriage and family are key in structure in our society. Family is the basic social unit of the state. It is a major social institution and perhaps the very heart of society. It is also without doubt that the foundation of the family is marriage. And being a practicing Christian country, Filipinos values the sanctity of marriage. Presented in this research paper is one of the controversial issues nowadays, a topic which is not only interesting, but crucial as it involves national interest. civil partnership, also known as civil union. In the Philippines, the issue of civil partnership has been the subject of legal and moral discussion in recent years, especially when Filipino lawmakers pushed for the recognition of civil partnerships for couples, whether they are of the same sex or opposite sex. House Bill number 6595, or the Civil Partnership Act, was filed in the 17th Congress, but it failed to get past the committee approval. In the 18th Congress, there are two bills, House Bill number 1357 and House Bill 2264, seeking to legalize civil partnerships. The discussion on this topic turns out to be more controversial after the papal approval of same-sex unions came from the documentary titled Francesco, where Pontiff was quoted as saying, "Homosexual people have a right to be in a family. They are children of God and have a right to a family. Nobody should be thrown out or be made miserable over it." With this statement, our lawmakers, government officials, both in executive and judiciary, the church, the body of Christ, the entire nation are divided in opinion as regards the legalization of civil partnership. The goal of this research is not to discuss the constitutionality of the civil partnership bill or its consistency or inconsistency with the Family Code of the Philippines, because if these two are the only issues that preclude the passage of the civil partnership bill into law, then it can be remedied by amending the present constitution and the family code, which can be done by the Philippine Congress through the pertinent legislative process. Accordingly, the primary aim of this research project is to conduct a further study on the topic at hand and assess, beyond the issue of constitutionality, whether there is indeed a need for civil partnership law. Considering the foregoing, the main question I desire to answer is having a civil partnership law in the Philippines for the common good? In my attempt to answer this question, a systematic discussion on the following issues are needed. Is marriage and civil partnership the same? Is civil partnership purely a contractual commitment with no religious or sectarian morality involved? Did proponents of civil partnership take into consideration every Filipino's interest? As I pursue the foregoing questions and issues, a review and examination of the historical and philosophical theology of the following topics are necessary. The civil partnership, its origin, concept, and purpose. Marriage, its origin, concept, and purpose. Marriage vis-a-vis civil partnership, the concept of separation of church and state. Law, its origin, concept, and elements. Meaning, concept, and role of common good in law and legal interpretation. Uh, I'm still working on the introduction, sir. Yung pa lang po yung natapos ko.
I think your work is a little heavy. You need to shorten it to finish in this class.
Yes, sir.
A miniature of a big topic, I think. And so how are you going to do the research? So you mentioned about historical, philosophical, and maybe historical, philosophical, and theological foundations.
That's my, actually, sir, yun sana yung idea ko, to really check on the historical and the philosophical theology of the
All right.
civil part of the marriage.
Okay, so philosophical theology. Now, yung philosophical theology, so nagbi-mix yung theology and philosophy, katulad ni na sino ba daw yung Summa Theologia, si
Sa St. Thomas Aquinas.
Aquinas, right. So, yung mga ganun, ano?
Yes, sir.
All right. And will you only use books, papers, or do you need to interview or no need?
More on books and papers.
All right. So just pure
Yes, sir.
research. All right.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Maybe you can specify that one in your method that you will just use pure library method. All right.
Yes, sir. I will just put
Yeah,
it.
thank you very much for that. I think you're in the right direction. And I feel that your paper is big, but maybe you can just try to uh, like shorten it
Yes, sir.
for the sake of this class. Maybe you can expand later.
Yes, sir.
How about Bert? Are you there?
Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir.
All right. About your paper
Mm,
introduction.
yes, sir.
Yeah, you can read your introduction.
My topic is about, or title is, in what way can a Christian counselor administer proper biblical counseling to a depressed Christian? Actually, I'm still working on my introduction, and I just had a draft and included what I have experienced through counseling. So I wrote here, and this is where my questions came from. So, some, excuse me, wala. Some years ago, I was so depressed, and I tried to seek counsel through a long distance call to 700 Club. So I then succeeded with my call and was able to talk to a lady counselor. Upon receiving my call, she immediately responded with a question like, uh, yes, hello, what is your problem? Do you believe in Jesus? Maybe you don't believe in Jesus. That's why you are having that kind of problem. Or you might be hiding something that doesn't please God. So that's what is it. And then she continued. She just keeps on talking and shared a verse to me. And then finally asked me to follow her in prayer, which was the sinner's prayer. So while listening to her, I was wondering, is this really a counselor? Is he a real counselor? Is this what a Christian counselor should do? So this, did she undergo training? To my dismay, I hung up the phone immediately without being consoled, and her response was just added to my problem. So maybe what she knows is that counseling is an all instruction, that if she has to counsel someone, all she needs to do is share a Bible verse that would apply to what the depressed Christian is going through. And another one is, wala. So my next action was that to seek counsel from a counselor, a Christian counselor who counsels through radio. I think he's well known, and he's also pastoring a big church in Metro Manila. So through his assistant, we were able to set a time for the counseling. So on that date, I went to their church, but his assistant told me that the counselor himself is not coming. So he did not come without even informing me that he is not available during that time. So I was wondering what these counselors, Christian counselors, were doing. Are they really trained as Christian counselors? Do they know about proper biblical counseling? So I came up with a question: in what way can a counselor administer proper biblical counseling to a depressed Christian? So that's uh, I didn't realize that they may be they may be really a Christian counselor, but not necessarily a biblical counselor. And I believe that there are proper ways in administering proper counseling to the Christian students. That's part, just that's a part of my draft, which I am still trying to fix or assemble.
Right.
Fix
Thank
that.
you, Albert. You just mentioned your what is that? Your the background, yeah, why you need to or why you want to do that research. Uh, my question now is, how are you going to do it? Will you use plain books or will you use survey or interview or other methods? So maybe you
Yes,
need to think.
I'm going to use books, sir, and papers,
Yeah, books.
and maybe some papers.
All right. So just plain a library, all right,
Yes,
with
sir.
interview or um, yeah. So right. So thank you for sharing, and let me uh,
Yes.
continue my presentation a while ago. Uh, this one. Now, your first question, you can answer it and put it one like chapter or section, and then also you answer your second question, and then maybe you put also in another section or develop your second point to support your main claim or argument. So whether you put in a question form or in a thesis form. So we already talked about taking notes, paraphrase, summarize, and code. And remember, critical thinking is like being a judge, which I also um, gave an illustration a while ago about this one, that you are acting like a judge when you are doing your um, research. You need to think. Uh, you have your own judgment. So you present the different sides or options, arguments, and then you decide. And maybe you need to ask the question. You need to defend your side or argument. Why you side on this? If there are uh, different options. So, for example, you are writing on the civil union or civil partnership. Those who agree and those who disagree, you need to present, and then why you side on those who agree or why you decide on those who disagree. Or if you want to be in the balance at the middle, you can also argue your case. So you're like a judge. Do not overuse direct quotations. You can usually summarize ideas in fewer words. Probably less than one-fourth of your cards should quote directly, right? So do not overuse direct quotations. You can summarize or paraphrase. Conducting primary research. First-hand information gathered from interviews, experiments, personal data gathering, audience experience, statistical analysis and surveys, or sometimes being a participant observer. You're involved, so you can do this in gathering your data. You can specify if you are using these ones or just pure library method. Now, the third question, answering the third question, which will be another section, you just put a title, or developing your third point to support your main claim or thesis. So your first point is your introduction. Now, your second point is answer to question number one. And then your third point is the question to answer to question number two. Your fourth point will be answer the question number 3, and then you end up with your conclusion, which is point number 5. You can follow that format logically. That's a 1-4. We'll see others in the future, but in your research paper, you can just do that simple. If you have 3 questions, so point number 2, 3, 4, and then the point number 1 is introduction, and point number 5 is conclusion. So as simple as that. If you have 3 questions, if you have 4 questions, and then you have about 6 chapters or sections. If you have 2 questions, then you have only the introduction, answer to first question, and answer to second question, and then conclusion. You have only 4 sections or chapters. Right? Again, picking up notes, paraphrase, summarize, or quote. Remember, scholarly writing is like cooking with a twist, which I also shared a while ago. That in cooking, you have to master first the dish, let's say adobo. You need to master that one, and then maybe later on you'll try to add a twist. You add your a spice or another ingredient as a contribution. Right. Right. I'm just okay. Now, writing your conclusion. You summarize what you have been discussing, and then you can conclude. In your conclusion, you have your thesis restatement, questions and answers, short reason and evidence. Why your work matters, and recommend or call for more research with some suggested researches. So you can end your paper like this. You know, you summarize, and then you write your conclusion, and then you recommend. So summarize, conclusion, and recommendation. That will be your total conclusion. In the conclusion, there's the thesis restatement. Now, we learned how to turn your main question into a thesis. So when you finish all your research, you can now state your main argument or main claim or main thesis in a sentence. You can put that in the introduction, repeat it in the conclusion, but then in using new words or other words. Don't just copy the words in the introduction of your thesis and then put it in your conclusion. And then why your work matters, why is it important? So implication for a bigger study or bigger or in the society. And then you recommend or call for more researches, right? Don't write in summary or in conclusion or in closing. Just put your summary and then conclusion and writing. Usually, sometimes you say in summary or in conclusion or in closing. No need for all of this. Write instead, as the research has demonstrated, or to review, or we can see, or it is clear. So you can use these words to end your research paper. All right, so not in summary, not in conclusion, not in closing, but as the research has demonstrated, or to review, or we can see, or it is clear. And then no new material, meaning don't add a new topic. You just focus on your topic and finish it, that's all. And don't apologize in your conclusion. You don't say, I may not be an expert, but I think. So don't apologize. You are